Hello ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, innies, outies and in-betweeners. My name's Dan. Welcome back to another PAP Reports. Today is Monday, April 27th, 2020. Today we're starting with something some of you may already have seen and many of you may already have heard. Key workers are being stopped and fined for doing their job. And it's not an isolated incident, and it's been happening since the start of the lockdown. There have been reports of nurses and other NHS staff being stopped, questioned and in some cases fined. And now with the lockdown in its fifth week, police still haven't learned that delivery drivers and riders are a necessity when it comes to trying to enforce a lockdown. Rather than simply allowing delivery drivers and riders to do the job, which in turn helps people to stay isolated and locked down, they seem to be abusing the people who are in fact trying to help people survive. Now, this one is about a deliveroo rider who was stopped and issued a £50 fixed penalty notice in York. A penalty that is in many cases more than a day's wage for one of these riders. The Independent Workers Union of Great Britain has written to the council asking for the fine to be scrapped, saying that several couriers were fined £50 by police for breaching traffic regulations on April the 18th, and they say that that's close to a day's wages for workers. The letter says day in, day out, couriers are delivering food and groceries to these people, self-isolating, and the many thousands in York adhering to the stay-at-home instruction directive from the UK government. At a time when the strength of community bonds is relied upon, York's couriers are volunteering to deliver groceries and hot meals for the NHS workers and prescriptions to those at highest risk from COVID. It's important to say that this was a penalty for riding in a place that would normally be a pedestrian area. But clearly during lockdown there's unlikely to be many pedestrians there. In fact, the traffic regulations for pedestrian areas are generally there to prevent congestion and accidents, which is unlikely to happen. And a bit of common sense would have realised that. Deliveroo and volunteer pharmacy courier Ethan Bradley is one of those who were fined and said, "I was absolutely shocked by the confrontational behaviour of the officer who stopped me. He not only grabbed my handlebars and threatened me with arrest if I didn't give my details, but by not using protective equipment put both myself and my customers at risk." A spokesman for North Yorkshire Police said restrictions to stop drivers and cyclists using pedestrianised streets are still in place as normal. They said although the city centre streets are currently very quiet due to the lockdown, this does not mean that pedestrianised areas can be used by cyclists and other vehicles. North Yorkshire Police is not responsible for lifting or imposing these restrictions. This is a council matter, but if a cyclist and drivers are breaching the restrictions, police can enforce them. But then again, the police also have that wonderful phrase, discretion. It's a shame it's only used when it benefits them. A council spokesperson said that while the bollards that are usually put up to stop people driving through the city centre and pedestrianised areas were removed at the start of the lockdown, the traffic restrictions were never dropped. They said whilst food delivery couriers may be classed as essential services and key workers during the pandemic, this does not extend to the relaxation of traffic regulations for those services. No, but it's okay to relax human rights for the rest of us. 29-year-old Reese Baker from Gloucester had his £4,000 Honda motocross bike stolen during early hours of April the 15th from his home in Churchdown. After reporting the theft the very next day, Gloucester Police sent a letter to let him know that the theft will not be investigated, added that it has not been deemed to be in the public interest to investigate further. The letter said, "As you will be aware, the coronavirus situation has placed additional demands on the police service, and because of this, difficult decisions have to be made around the investigation of some crimes. It has been decided that the crime you have reported will not be investigated any further, but has been recorded. It has been deemed not to be in the public interest to progress the investigation any further, and the crime has been reported as closed. The decision is based on providing members of the public with the best service possible with the resources available." Mr. Baker said, "The letter upset me quite a bit, to be honest, partly because it was only the next day that I received it. As you can well imagine, after seeing a burglary had taken place at my family home, to read that the police won't be looking into this for me, even though there is CCTV of the villainous act taking place, they won't be helping me on this occasion," he added. "I understand completely these are uncertain times for all of us, and the frontline services are stretched. But I'm in need of the police, not a doctor. Why would any burglar not go out and do this when our police won't, their words, won't even look into this for you? I work so hard, I have 2 jobs, paid tax my entire life for someone to rock up, break into a house and thieve an expensive bike when the police refuse to even review CCTV. I felt let down by my own city's authorities. Losing his bike is heartbreaking to me, so thanks Gloucestershire Police for your support within my uncertain time also. Mr Baker has since made an official complaint to Gloucestershire Police. Gloucestershire Police has since apologised to Mr Baker and outlined ways that they have investigated, adding the force is still investigating and responding to all types of crime, and urged people to continue to report incidents. A spokesman from Gloucestershire Police apologised to Mr Baker over his perception of the investigation and outlined some of the things that they had done to investigate the crime. They said, "We are sorry to hear that Mr Baker is unhappy with the investigation into the theft of his motorbike and have apologised. Calls and reports to the constabulary since coronavirus legislation came into place have increased significantly, and it is vital that we respond to these appropriately and carry out patrols to ensure the law is being followed." Well, the reason they've increased is because you've asked people to grass up their neighbours. Maybe if you just concentrated on actual crimes, then things might look a bit better for you. Last week, Radio Ulster received a phone call from a woman claiming police had ordered her to leave her front garden and stay indoors. The Castlewellan mother of a child with special needs said that passing police had made the request Easter Sunday, even though she was alone with only members from her own household. She went on to say how the following day she was again sitting in the garden when 2 police cars pulled up and officers from the police service of Northern Ireland told her that a neighbour had reported her for being seated in her garden. She also recounted that another mother was driving her autistic child to a familiar park for exercise when police stopped her and told her that what she was doing was unlawful, forcing her back home and leaving her child in distress. The problem being is that neither of those situations were or are unlawful. There's nothing in the Northern Ireland coronavirus restrictions, regulations or law that allows police to stop someone from sitting with their household in their own garden, or to prevent a mother of an autistic child from driving to a place that's appropriate for that child to exercise. Before the weekend, the Police Service of Northern Ireland Carrickfergus Facebook page wrote, "We are doing our best to get the message across. However, some people seem to think it doesn't apply to them." Those people are the police, aren't they? So let's get the message out there. Exercise begins and ends at your front door. By that, I do not mean walking from your front door to your car to drive somewhere for exercise. This will not be tolerated no matter what your excuse. We will ask you to return home immediately. A response to that post on Facebook pointed out that UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock had clarified on Question Time that to get in your car and drive a short distance to go for a walk on your own or maybe with your dog is fine, because you're not coming into contact with another person. Police Service of Northern Ireland responded by saying, "Look at the date. 4 days ago, a lot has changed since then." Well, that's certainly the way to get the public on side, isn't it? The post was called a revealing insight into the PSNI constable's deep ignorance of the law, which he or she was meant to be enforcing. Nowhere do the regulations stipulate that exercise must begin and end at your front door, and claiming that driving to exercise will not be tolerated no matter what your excuse failed to comprehend that not only does nothing in the legislation expressly prohibit car journeys to a place of exercise, but the law itself provides a series of what they describe as reasonable excuses for leaving home, one of which is to avoid injury or illness or to escape the risk of harm. Something which for individuals with autism and for others will often involve a car journey to a suitable location for exercise, without which they can suffer destructive behaviour. That entire post vanished after Jamie Bryson, an outspoken loyalist activist who in recent weeks has instead been urging people to work together to save lives, questioned the legal basis for it. And this is something we've seen a few forces do after making arbitrary claims based on their opinions rather than the law. They quickly backtrack and scurry off and hide. Apparently, some paedophiles and rapists who want their names removed from the sex offenders register have been accommodated by some police forces. Isn't that nice? Many offenders across the country have applied and their application to be removed from the sex offenders register has been granted. In 2011, a human rights case led to a change in the system. 2 sex offenders claimed it was unfair to be kept on the register indefinitely. As a result, offenders placed indefinitely can apply to be taken off after 15 years. The National Police Chief Council lead for the management of sexual offenders and violent offenders, Chief Constable Michelle Skier, said, "Managing the potential risk posed by registered sexual offenders within the community is a complex area of work for police." She added, "I'm confident that forces across the country are each day effectively managing risk posed to the public by such individuals." In one county, there has been 4 offenders applied to be removed, and all 4 were granted permission to be removed from the register. Crimes these people committed included making indecent images of children, indecent assault on a male under 16, intercourse with a girl under 16, indecent assault on a female under 16, and indecent assault on a female under 14. All these people served time in prison for the crimes and were on the register for more than 70 years between them, but have since been taken off the register. So the courts impose a punishment and the police can retract that punishment for sex offenders. Can't say I've ever heard them tell a public order offender not to worry about going to their community service. Strange that. The Belfast Telegraph reported yesterday of fears of a lockdown revolt in Northern Ireland. The report follows claims that there have been more cars on the roads and parks busy with people. First Minister Arlene Foster suggested restrictions could be relaxed at a faster pace than other parts of the UK. She said lockdown measures will be eased when certain scientific and public health criteria are met and not against set timelines. Last week it was suggested that signs have been emerging that some sections of society are slowly starting to break from lockdown despite continued warnings against complacency. The Department for Infrastructure said it is continuing to closely monitor the volume of traffic. It said that since lockdown on March the 23rd, on average, there has been a reduction in traffic flows by about 62% from Monday to Friday and about 70% at weekends compared to this period in previous years. Mrs Foster, meanwhile, hinted that Northern Ireland may move away from the restrictions at a different pace from worse hit parts of the UK. It will be led by criteria that will be set down and agreed by ourselves in the Northern Ireland Executive in conjunction with our colleagues in other parts of the UK, she said. And because of that, you could well see different parts of the UK move in different time to other parts because it will be criteria led. What do I mean by that? She said, well, we have a look at the amount of admissions to hospital, the admissions to intensive care units, the number of deaths we have, what it means for us in terms of the science. We have a scientific advisory group in London that advises, and then we also have our own advisory group here in Northern Ireland and our own chief medical officer. So they will be looking at all of the information, all of the data we collect in Northern Ireland. We will bring that together and then we will look at it that way. The Police Service of Northern Ireland has said it has been receiving an average of more than 600 reports a day from people, grasses, identifying others for allegedly breaking lockdown rules. Within the first 6 days of its launch on April the 10th, the PSNI's dedicated COVID-19 webpage had received 3,787 complaints alleging a breach of regulations. Another mother with an autistic child who was stopped by police, this time in Glasgow. Julie Johnston was walking with her son Peter in Drumpellier Park when she was stopped by police constables. Julie said 30-year-old Peter has autism and a learning disability and is really struggling to understand the lockdown and why he can't go out. We were stopped by the police and told essential travel only. They didn't seem to know about the change in the rules for autistic people, and it was understandably really upsetting for us all. I'm trying my hardest to look after my son and taking all of the precautions I can to make sure he doesn't get sick. We're not taking liberties at all. I really hope that the message gets across to all police officers so families with autistic people can travel outside of their local area to exercise safely, should they need to. It makes such a difference. A Police Scotland spokesperson said officers are being asked to use common sense in their approach with members of the public. They will explain the legislation, encourage compliance and then use enforcement only when necessary. As we become aware of examples where engagement with the public is not of that nature, then officers are reminded that our approach must be fair, reasonable and proportionate. Nick Ward, director of the National Autistic Society Scotland, said the charity has written to the Chief Constable Ian Livingstone asking that police officers are made aware of changes. I mean, personally, I don't get how it's so difficult for senior police to explain these changes to the police staff in their shift briefings. I don't know, maybe that's just too easy for them. Northamptonshire Police are looking for a pat on the back after revealing that this year break-ins have fallen by 34%. Remember, this is the same police force whose Chief Constable Nick Adderley said in a statement that the force would start looking into shopping bags to check for essential items before backtracking in spectacular fashion. And apparently this has absolutely nothing to do with the coronavirus lockdown. Nothing to do, of course, with the fact that most people are now at home, making it more difficult for burglars. Oh no. This is entirely down to the police force being so fantastic. I guess that's why burglary rates were higher before everyone got their house arrest. Chief Constable Adderley said, "Burglary has always been a top priority for me, and I am delighted to learn that burglaries in Northamptonshire have reduced so much. In only the first year, our specialist burglary team, led by Detective Superintendent Paul Reimers, has been operating. Now, some people may think that because we've achieved a decent reduction, we're now going to focus on something else. This is absolutely not the case. I'm expanding the team and investing more and more resources into Operation Crooked in order to hammer down this reduction even further." He says, "My message to burglars really is very simple. We will not tolerate you in Northamptonshire and you will be caught." Burglaries in one area of Northampton have fallen by more than 50% in the first year of this Operation Crooked. Northamptonshire's Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner Stephen Mould said, "People told me that they wanted to see a focus on crimes that really affect their community, like burglary, and Northamptonshire Police have truly delivered. Not only has the force cracked down on burglary, but they have worked hard to explain to people how they can help prevent crime, and I'm sure that all of these actions will have had a very positive effect on the confidence and safety of communities across Northamptonshire." So, what do you think, guys? I mean, do you think that overnight Northamptonshire Police have upped their game? Or do you think that they're just trying to use the COVID restrictions as a way to try and impress the public with figures that couldn't possibly have anything to do with everybody being at home? Could they? Data collected by the Eye newspaper has revealed that armed police have accidentally fired their weapons more than 100 times in the last 5 years, including guns being shot on sensitive military installations and ammunition fired in private homes. A Freedom of Information responses have shown that nearly 1/3 of all the incidents have occurred when police were in a public place or conducting operations such as searches or raids, although the majority took place during training or while loading and unloading weapons inside police stations. The data shows the number of accidental weapon firings: 106 incidents across 34 forces between 2015 and 2019, was more than double the number of incidents where armed officers from all forces opened fired intentionally over the same period. Among them were 2 occasions when officers shot themselves in the foot, and one where a weapon was fired after it was obtained by the son of an officer in Northern Ireland. The National Police Chief Council, which represents UK police forces with the exemption of the PSNI and MOD police, said that the number of accidental discharges should be seen in the context of hundreds of thousands of duties performed by Britain's armed officers. It said this meant that less than 0.001% of duties had resulted in the unintentional firing of a weapon. I'm sure that would make a lot of difference if that unintentional firing killed somebody. Baroness Jones, a Green Party peer and former member of the Metropolitan Police Authority, said these are concerning numbers. We know that forces have lost a lot of experienced officers due to cuts and austerity. It would seem that training needs to be looked at again. The rules are tight, but are they being applied? The highest number of accidental shootings, known as unintentional discharges, no jokes, was recorded by the Metropolitan Police, which was responsible for 39 of the 106 shots. In all but one of the 106 cases across the country disclosed, there was no injuries to members of the public. The sole injury occurred in 2018 in Bournemouth, when a suspect suffered a gunshot wound to the arm after he rammed a police vehicle and caused an officer to fire his weapon. 2 Metropolitan Police officers suffered gunshot wounds to their foot while handling their weapon. Greater Manchester Police have been flouting the coronavirus regulations by allowing hundreds of people to attend a funeral last week. Police say they allowed hundreds of people to gather at the funeral of Mr Ibiza, Clive Pinnock, to protect wider public safety. Emotions at the gatherings were high, and as such, police made a decision not to intervene in the interest of public safety, unless the wider public were put at risk, Greater Manchester Police said. However, police were called to reports of gunshots at Gorton Cemetery at around 7 p.m. that night, where they said several gatherings connected to the funeral were taking place. It was reported that a man walked into the crowd and opened fire before he was slashed with a knife. What a way to protect the community. Police said the injured man was found on nearby Waterhouse Road with knife wounds and was taken to hospital for treatment. A 34-year-old man was later arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. As I say, it's nice to see the police sticking to their word and keeping the public safe. Superintendent Rebecca Boyce from Greater Manchester Police's City of Manchester Division said, "We were made aware of several gatherings taking place yesterday in Gorton in relation to a funeral. In the lead up to the funeral, officers engaged with the immediate family of the man who had sadly lost his life to explain the government guidelines and to discuss details of their plans. A careful assessment was then made about the policing approach to any gatherings associated with the funeral. Our overriding priority was to ensure that the wider public were kept safe. We continued to closely monitor the situation, and as it progressed, it was clear that the emotions of those at the gathering were high, and therefore a decision was made in the interests of public safety not to intervene unless the wider public were put at risk by the groups." Well, isn't it nice that the police can just override what the government say? An arrest was subsequently made of a man who remains in custody in relation to a firearms discharge which happened close by. We understand that there has been public concern regarding the events of yesterday. We want to sincerely thank the majority of the public, many of whom are struggling with the loss of loved ones, who have not risked the safety of others by attending gatherings such as funerals in breach of the government guidelines. So it's in breach of the government guidelines, but the police allowed it to happen. How? She said, "We all have a legal and moral responsibility to abide by the legislation which is in place to save lives. But it's okay for the police to pick and choose who gets to follow that." She said, we can only get through this difficult time with the support of all of our communities, and therefore we would continue to appeal to members of the public to follow the government advice and work with us during what is a particularly challenging time for everyone. A big thank you to Patreon supporters: Adi, Audrey, Bill, Carl, Chris, Copwatch UK, Danielle, Dave, Dean, Holly, Ian, J, Marty Lab, Misdemeanor, Peter, President Trump, Rich, Savas and Stephen. Your support is really helping me to continue to provide you with this daily content. Anyway, that is all I have for you today. Please like, share, comment and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, as I know many of you will. And until next time, stay safe, look after each other, film the police and other officials. Right, all. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content and you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so. In the description of every video there are some links to ways that you're able to help support the channel so I can continue putting out content. If you're unable to help us in that way, hit that subscribe button up the top there. If you haven't already, become a subscriber. That is support enough. Share the videos, comment, like, it all helps. If you're looking for something else to watch, up top there is my latest video. Down the bottom there is a video that YouTube recommends for you.